Ancient mysteries, stone chambers, hidden symbols, and stories can be found beneath Pennsylvania's serene forests and mountains that it would be odd to overlook this voyage into the past, where the ground itself remembers and certain mysteries refuse to remain buried at the Susquehannock burial mounds. Mounds of burial. The river flows calmly now, but in the past, it saw more than just canoes and commerce along its banks. The Susquehanna River rises in odd, purposeful humps in the fertile core of Pennsylvania. Mounds are too symmetrical, too exact, and too deliberate to be accidental hills formed by erosion and time. When the first European settlers arrived, they spotted them right away, and they have been whispering to anyone who listened. They questioned the Susquehannock locals about mounds that were sprouting out of the ground in areas where no typical land feature should be regarding them, who constructed them, and why the Susquehannocks, who were renowned for their imposing size and presence, responded specifically. Some said that the mounds were sacrosanct, while others claimed that they symbolized a deeper mystery that even their predecessors were unaware of. Constructed but had inherited. The Susquehannocks were powerful individuals who were characterized as tall in colonial journals, according to certain reports, broad-shouldered fighters with intricate tattoos and strange armor. Captain John Smith, among others, asserted that they were almost a head taller than the majority of Europeans, although even they seemed to hold on to these mounds as traces of something more ancient, something that was all but lost when people moved west due to their passion and necessity. Farmers delved into the mounds, demonstrating their keen curiosity. Skeletal remains were not usually what they expected to find, but some much larger than typical skulls, with enormous jawbones, and, in some situations, there were stories of bones that were more than 7 feet long, and the burial rooms were bordered by strange carvings or stone coffins with implements and relics fashioned from mica and copper, as well as of symbols engraved straight into the bones. These not all findings were formally recorded. In fact, many were secretly repressed or lost, and some people blamed that the Smithsonian Institution is accused of gathering the odd items and then storing them in vaults that will never be opened. Whether that is accurate or not is still up for debate, but it is difficult to fill in the gaps in the historical record. Disregard one such location close to Safe Harbor, Pennsylvania, which was said to have uncovered a huge burial chamber in the early. According to local reports from the 1900s, a dome-shaped mound that was unearthed revealed a variety of bodies arranged. The largest skeleton, according to locals, was over 8 feet tall, and there were clay effigies all around it. Metal implements, as well as a crystal-like object held in its palm. Shortly after the site was purchased by a business, and everything within was either removed or reburied. This time under another instance involving asphalt and concrete came from Towanda, when a farmer discovered a chamber beneath his fields while there were stone walls set up like a beehive and what he said were human remains unlike any he had ever seen inside a well that was being dug. Had ever seen. He displayed some of the treasures at a nearby tavern, but one evening they disappeared. So did the chamber's. Subsequent land surveys showed no proof that it had ever existed. But possibly the most peculiar feature of the alignment of these mounds is important since many of them are oriented to follow the stars as seen on archaeological maps. Burial mounds aligning with equinox routes, solstice locations, and even specific constellation movements for it is difficult to explain this level of cosmic accuracy in a supposedly primitive society. In Winnetka County, a mound once situated atop a hill that, before it was leveled in the process, provided a clear view of the sunrise at both solstice points. A local pastor in the 20th century claimed to have penetrated a stone chamber beneath it and detailed a set of obsidian blades. Discs with stars and spirals etched into them, and a strong sense of static electricity that resembles the atmosphere before a lightning strike. Government representatives arrived a few days later and blocked off the area, but no explanation was ever provided, and rumors persist to this day. In certain mounds, particularly those that are still standing, residents claim strange flickering lights. One man who camped next to a mound in the early days experienced electromagnetic disruptions and occasionally felt as though he was being watched. A construction foreman near the area claimed to have seen glowing people strolling around its perimeter soon before dawn in the 1980s. According to Conestoga River, 3 of his employees suffered injuries following the demolition of a mound for a road project. Elders in some adjacent communities say that the myth is as unsettling as the strange incidents and fire that later destroyed their records. Tall creatures with eyes that gleamed blue in the firelight, buried in the mounds of the sky. Although others claim the mounds are not tombs, but marks, nodes, like acupuncture sites in the earth, in a lost matrix of power or energy. Are accounts of individuals who attempted to loot the mounds but were either killed or disappeared completely. Currently, the majority of these historic formations are no longer there. They have been plowed under and buried, while some have signs that only obliquely acknowledge their presence without delving into the more profound legends. But many who grew up close to them and experienced that peculiar hum in the earth is more knowledgeable about the purpose of the Susquehannock mounds. Were they merely tombs, or were they also gateways, warnings from observatories? Why are there so many reports of large skeletons, eerie symbols, and supernatural occurrences? But one thing is certain. The earth remembers. The mounds may be silent now, but the questions they pose are more pressing than ever. If you happen to be strolling close to the Susquehannock, don't stare at those gentle rising humps in the earth for too long at nightfall. When the air becomes heavy and the birds stop talking, something could be peering back from underneath them. Monoliths. An extended shadow is formed by Bald Eagle Mountain's monolith stretching along the Appalachian Mountain spine over central Pennsylvania. Its flanks are covered in dense for the casual hiker. The forest and ancient rock make for a stunning and rough landscape. Serene landscape. Yet beneath the piece is something more, since some peaks are purposefully placed in massive stone monoliths with patterns, some upright and some inclined, all appearing to be out of place, have long been the subject of local conjecture regarding these rocks. Are they haphazard natural formations, or were they set on purpose by prehistoric people? For more than a century, surveyors and hikers have noted the peculiarity of single vertical stones, some weighing several tons, sitting in locations that could not have been deposited by a landslide or glacier. Many of these stones are with remarkable accuracy. Some are piled, while others are arranged in rows or circles. And on top of that, they frequently face. It's difficult to accept that some celestial markers, such as sunrise points, equinox locations, or star alignments, by chance. One of these formations is located close to the eastern ridge of the Bald Eagle Mountains. It is a huge, vertical block of isolated at the edge of a small, flat-faced stone stand about 10 feet tall. 4 smaller stones surrounded on the cliff, creating a rough semicircle that points to the horizon at each side like a keyhole. The rising sun goes straight through the notch between the monolith and a second object of the spring and fall equinoxes. That standing stone 100 feet distant. The alignment is too good to ignore the call from the locals. It is said that during equinox week, just before dawn, when the wind is exactly right, the Druids' gate hums. Have asserted that animals avoid it or that electronics malfunction when they are close to it. But the most bizarre tales come from people who have spent the night there. One man claimed to have had fire and stone circles in his dreams. There are no official traditions, but another person woke up with geometric patterns carved in the frost surrounding his sleeping bag. Geologists explain the location by stating that the stones are old sandstone that may have broken off from the cliff face. However, scientists are unable to explain the symmetry, positioning, or astronomical alignment. And this is not the only site that exhibits these characteristics. Another odd configuration can be found farther west, close to Port Matilda, where a row of long, flat stones are arranged end to end across the so-called stone line. Is a ridge that resembles a road in the forest that extends for over half a mile before vanishing into the stones. Are about the same size and width, resurfacing close to a creek bed after being in a forest, and natural erosion could never replicate that level of consistency. According to local legend, sky watchers utilized the trail for moonlit rites in the past. Mapped the stars and carved warnings into the stone of neighboring valleys. Farmers have discovered smaller stones. No one can understand the meaning of the marks used to clear fields. They are all engraved with spiral grooves or concentric circles that have likened them to early Norse runes or possibly Celtic ogham. But there is no proof that those cultures ever arrived in Pennsylvania, and the symbols continue to be used repeatedly in certain counties where they are a language. When no one is left to inquire, it's difficult to determine if it's a code or just meaningless scratches. There is another idea. Topic is rarely discussed in public, but frequently comes up in casual discussions with local historians about the monoliths were intended to be read from above, not from the ground at all. It seems crazy until you discover that when mapped, many of the formations create geometric patterns that are only discernible from the air, such as triangles, long intentional lines on historical aerial photographs, particularly ones shot prior to forestry and development. You may trace a few of these patterns that span miles, resembling a map of lost stars carved into the ground. And then there are near Beach Creek. There is a circle of upright stones that mimic celestial bodies rather than just aligning with them. Stones that resemble the Pleiades star cluster in terms of shape and spacing. Located further south close to Mill Hall has a central mark at the far end of two parallel rows of stones that precisely replicate the constellation of Orion. These ancient calendars, temples, and beacons, when seen from a particular location at sunrise in the early winter, would have constructed them. And why there are no records of the Susquehannock building such stones, and their oral traditions only. Mention the legends about stone watchers and sleeping giants beneath the hills depict mountains as both locations of power and caution that protect specific routes through the woods, as well as the enduring legend of the stone healer, an elderly person according to a mythology. A figure that is half rock and half man emerges when the stars return to their correct positions. The term to guard the gate between sky and root has never been fully defined, yet it's frequently associated with the sun. Academics think that the bald eagle monoliths may have existed before any known human activity in the region. Some people think the stones are natural, while others think they may have been the creation of a pre-native culture that has since vanished entirely, formed and positioned by landslides and long-gone glacier movements. But even proponents of natural causes frequently acknowledge the patterns, alignments, and repetition. Everything seems purposeful, and the mystery grows as you hear stories about GPS errors, abrupt temperature decreases, and magnetic anomalies close to some of the stones with compass needles spinning erratically. Some hikers who have momentary forgetfulness and lose hours they can't account for after trekking have reported this in at least 2 instances. These detailed, uncannily similar descriptions aren't just tales told around campfires. They are told along stone-lined roads collected years apart from individuals who did not interact. The stone formations appear to produce something and impact a memory or presence that we don't fully comprehend now. Many of these sites are tucked away in the woods, overlooked by everyone but the locals and the curious. There are no signs indicating their existence. Some people think that the stones weren't supposed to be visible to the public because of the official routes that lead to them, but shielded from the untrained sight, or perhaps shielded from it. If you happen to be trekking through Bald Eagle, look around you attentively. If you notice a lone standing stone in a clearing in the middle of a mountain that might be standing inside an old map that was created for a sky that is no longer ours and was engraved in stone and gloom. Petroglyphs, the Allegheny River's petroglyphs, which are written in stone rather than sound, reveal a language that predates speech. Along the Allegheny River's meandering banks, where the water chisels through lost forests and hills, ancient town carvings that no one can quite interpret are known as petroglyphs, and they can be eerie at times. Pictures carved into rock surfaces, frequently in locations that can only be reached by boat or cautious climbing, and they may be found anywhere. Dozens of symbols spread across the flat sandstone boulders close to the water's edge if you know where to look. Some are basic spirals, handprints, and primitive humanoid figures, while others are perplexing, like an unread book. Complex star patterns, strange creatures with lengthy limbs, abstract geometric grids, and creatures with spherical sum of the heads and radiating lines curiously resemble what viewers now could refer to as the most iconic helmeted figures. A collection of these carvings is located close to Parker's Landing, which the locals refer to as the Indian God Rocks. The location has even though many of the 50 visible petroglyphs have faded over time, enough of them are still there to make a noticeable impact. They were not inactive. Some characters and doodles seem to be holding tools or staves, while others appear to be floating or emerging from spiral patterns. There are recurring starbursts and ladder shapes that experts have interpreted as portals or doorways across several locations and consistently pointing in particular directions, according to indigenous oral traditions. These stones are warning signs, guides, and even sacred agreements with the soil. Yet know the native peoples who may have carved them, perhaps the Lenape's ancestors, can be fully decoded by someone alive now. Few written documents were left by Shawnee, and some academics think the sculptures are far older than the petroglyphs nearby. At a location known as Rainbow Rocks, Franklin features a recurrent motif of an inverted triangle encircled by 7 dots, although local elders claim it symbolizes the Watchers from the Seven. Archaeologists have written it off as ornamental that refers to a far ancient tradition of visitors who appeared out of the sky to teach, warn, and then disappear. Whether the 7 dots could be stars or something else, yet the symbol is found in over 100 petroglyphs. The engravings are located much above river level in some places, which would have been almost why carved symbols where no one can easily see them unless they were intended to be seen. Unreachable without ladders or ropes. There are also intriguing similarities across other river systems along the route for something or someone else to observe. The same figures repeatedly show up in Allegheny, the Monongahela, and even some areas of the Ohio River Basin. Humanoids with concentric circles with chord dots and zigzag lines on outstretched arms that appear to represent movement or vibration. A man standing between 2 whirling vortices with arms raised and a head surrounded by rays is depicted on a stone close to Brady's Bend. There's a triangle pointing down behind it. Some people think it's a stylized map, while others think it's a message that is no longer intended for us. And although many of these carvings are located in isolated areas, some are curiously situated close to contemporary. Locals found a series of glyphs in the infrastructure in a secret hollow right beneath a now-defunct train bridge that a group of amateur scholars chronicled the 1970s, which arose out of nowhere and matched no recognized indigenous style. Given that there were no indications of weathering or age on the rock, explanations ranging from psychic impression to fake unexpected appearance. No professional archaeologist looked into it, and vandals stealthily cleaned the glyphs. A year later, however, the mystery lies not just in the symbols but also in the sensation that many visitors to these locations report. A strange time seems weird, and even though birds are tweeting, there's an odd silence by the riverbank. Talk about unexpected headaches, emotional outbursts, or feeling like you're being watched. One man, a kayaker, discovered during low tide. Glyph code stone spoke of experiencing such a strong sense of sorrow and remorse that he broke down in tears and was unable to explain why. There is also a disturbing pattern that shows up in specific places. The missing stones with petroglyphics that date back to the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s have subsequently been discovered completely cleaned, or, in certain situations, even photographic records have vanished, although some of them can be explained by erosion and vandalism. The sheer volume of lost glyphs begs the question of who is removing them. One fringe hypothesis is gaining traction regarding these ancient writings and the reasons why not everyone thinks they were human messages in the first place. Quiet popularity implies that the glyphs were part of a code left by non-native beings and were never intended for human understanding. Location that may not even exist in this world. The Star People legends that scholars frequently disregard describe visitors who entered according to certain indigenous beliefs. The markings were directions for luminous boats that traveled on light rather than water. Transmitted from these creatures and documented by early tribes, but never fully comprehended in a single documented late tale. The stones were locations where the sky people touched the earth's surface, and the river was a hallowed root that reflected the sky. Could it perhaps be true that the carvings claimed to represent their fingerprints were a creative way of indicating they left a trace? Skeptics acknowledge that the carvings merit more investigation, but the issue is that many of them are situated on private property and are disregarded by a complete language could be slipping away one chisel at a time, either through official surveys or gradually disappearing due to erosion and river rise. Stroke at a time. But not everything is gone. A tiny team of contemporary scholars, including archaeologists and mystics, adventurers, are quietly mapping what they can. They have started comparing geological features, satellite images, and celestial overlays. Some people who are searching for a larger picture think that the petroglyphs are a part of a larger system rather than merely messages. Whether these carvings are nodes on a vanished system connected by energy lines that formerly pulse for a purpose, whether these are historical messages or echoes of something less than human, One thing is certain. Someone made a significant effort to leave them with someone who could read the stars and who understood that these rivers would carry memories in addition to water. The next time you're close to the edge of the Allegheny, examine the rocks carefully to see whether there's anything that looks like a smee or crack more than that. It may be a whisper from a millennium ago or a lengthier story that has been preserved in stone and is still awaiting someone who can understand its language. In southeast Pennsylvania, the lost tribes of the Octorow Creek follow the creek's curves, and you'll discover a place shrouded in obscurity and shrouded in mist. Its name may not be as significant as other well-known mysteries, but among the undulating hills and thick forests, the area has a far stranger legacy among the residents than it first seems. This is the tale of a people who appear to have disappeared, not only because they were uprooted or wiped out by time or conflict, but because they were ingested by something much older. They were the Octorero guardians of holy knowledge, the so-called lost tribes, and in contrast to the well-known Susquin or Lape, this group left behind caretakers of something that was never fully understood. Minimal evidence. They are only mentioned in passing in early colonial records and are frequently cryptically alluded to as these tales of stonekeepers or people who communicate with the earth weren't merely lyrical. The first trappers and settlers reported coming across indigenous people who lived in secret communities in stone houses with slanted roofs rather than in villages. Roofs were usually built partially into the ground, used motions rather than word to communicate, and disappeared without a word. One explorer in the late 1600s claimed to have discovered what he called a submerged hamlet close to the mouth of around a perfectly round stone well in the creek. A collection of little stone homes was constructed. Inside the well was when he tried to descend a spiral staircase that led into the dark. A local guide dragged him back, cautioning that the settlement below the Watcher's Wake was deserted. In the next spring, a flood is said to have destroyed the entire building. It has never been found again, but rumors of the Octorow people have persisted. There were said to be boulders can be shaped by stone craftsmen without the use of tools, and somewhat stone objects that are out of place with known regional designs have been discovered buried throughout the area. One such discovery, which is currently missing, was a tablet engraved with a map of stars, and a farmer who discovered it while excavating a foundation revealed a set of symbols that resembled contemporary binary code days after the relic vanished from his barn. A local antiquarian was suspected by the villagers for a strange fire. Others accused the onlookers of arson. And people around the creek have been complaining about the sound for generations, detecting a deep, resonant hum coming from underneath the ground. It's not continuous, but it's consistent and constantly close. One individual, a retired geologist, set up equipment at daybreak or right before a major downpour recorded and ascertained that the noise originated from beneath a thick woodland close to a creek bend. He then withdrew his description, describing it as a standing frequency as though the earth is vibrating from some inside device. The people associated with this region, known as the Lost Tribe, refuse to discuss their findings ever again. Hardly ever appear in official history, and when they do, it's always as an odd footnote. But look into colonial surveyors' records, and you start to notice trends that point to buried stone pathways and invisible guides. One particularly disturbing story about the ones who never age was written by a Quaker missionary in 1723 in the woods close to Octorow. He says he met a woman who spoke flawless English but was dressed totally in off fur and woven scrolls. She cautioned him from waking the creatures that lie beneath the earth and mentioned a moment when the sky he thought she was insane. But when he turned to go, she disappeared without a trace. Crack and the old blood will rise. The stream itself is a major factor in the enigma of Octorow Creek, which acts strangely in contrast to it floods nearby waterways when others are still calm, and fish avoid specific areas of it, as do swimmers, according to a local tradition. The more isolated ponds occasionally show strange burns or rashes even when the water tests cleaned at a guardian or jailer of whatever is beneath. Another claims that the creek is alive and that it is a wound in the soil that. Never then there are the stone circles, almost a dozen of which are dispersed throughout the restored time and memory. Octorow wildness is frequently confused with colonial fire pits or ancient property signs. They are made up of smooth river stones arranged in an eerie resemblance to the old stone circles of Europe that uniformly spaced, with a single obsidian shard buried in the middle of each, surrounded by moss and earth layers. Some people claim that the stones pulse at night, while others assert that if you sleep in the 1950s, a team of amateur archaeologists tried to map every archaeological site in the world. Circles, according to their notes, which, when joined, created a nearly flawless sigil, a shape that looked like A before they could announce their findings. The lead researcher passed away under strange circumstances in a double spiral with a central axis. Circumstances. His notes disappeared from the archive of the local historical organization. Another recurring story concerns that locals refer to the Whisper Hole, a small cave opening close to the creek's southern tip, as being just barely large enough for a human to fit through, and it quickly plunges into the ground. Inside, guests claim to hear voices not quite whispers, but chanting that is borne by the wind and doesn't disturb the air for those who go too far and have documented odd occurrences such as sickness, time loss, and in one instance, appearing fled the cave carrying a strange object in their backpack, a pendant made of carved stone in the shape of an eye. As of right now, no academic team has thoroughly plowed the area, which is still peaceful and rural, and has purposefully ignored some claims. There's a reason for it in order to safeguard the ancestors of those early settlers. The secret is not only inconvenient. When asked about the legends, those who still reside close to the creek usually remain silent. Some claim that the lost tribe still walks, the others think they went back to their original location in woods that haven't been touched by time. Some believe they never went. Instead, they simply sank farther into the earth, merging with the stone they revered. Perhaps the lost tribe was a myth, but something that knew about it traveled through the Octoro forest, the stars that etched themselves into stone and left behind inexplicable traces when the fog sets in and the creek mutters a little, a people who have been forgotten by history but not by the land louder than normal, giving the impression that the forest itself is remembering. The Volstiga County's subterranean chambers are a peaceful location nestled beneath the northern parts of Pennsylvania are filled with winding roads, dense forests, and extended periods of quiet punctuated only by the rustle of trees and the sporadic cries of hawks, but deep inside its soil, in its forgotten ridges, are echoes of along the sides of the Allegheny Plateau and in the forested slopes close to Pine Creek Gorge. There is something unfamiliar. Caves, natural holes, stone, and hidden constructions that are difficult to explain, chambers, underground rooms, and precisely designed architectural spaces, and nobody is aware of who created them, when they were created, or why the locals refer to them as the Tauga Vaults. The most were discovered by chance by farmers, hikers, or hunters. One of the first documented reports dates back to 1889, when A. surveyor claimed to have discovered a stone room beneath a hill covered in moss. He described a rectangular area that was around 12 feet by 8 with fitted stones that are dry laid without cement and expertly interlocked, with no obvious entry led to the chamber, which he had to enter by squeezing through a seemingly natural crevice in a mountainside. He noted that the room felt strange, as though something had been waiting and departed right before me. Yet there was only dust and silence. Arrived, marking the start of the decades that followed, during which time additional chambers were found throughout Tioga County. Wrote about finding a little opening in the hillside while pursuing a wounded deer. He pursued it with a lantern. The trail down until he arrived at a room that was unlike any cave I've seen, with hand-carved masonry and walls that he claimed to have seen designs engraved into the rock, such as spirals and eyes, that sparkled slightly blue as if covered with stars. Odd people and a stone altar with something he couldn't see laying on top of it in the middle of the room merely state that it tugged at his eyes and thoughts. He never went back to the cave, and his journal ends. Suddenly after a few I wasn't supposed to uncover the account until several entries later, with just one last paragraph beneath it. Since then, stories have in the 1920s, a group of teenagers accumulated slowly, like soot on an old lantern. Reported discovering the cave while trekking. One of them, a boy named Dale, vanished, and his companions came back by themselves days later, trembling and unable to speak. Dale emerged from the forest in silence, pallid, frightened, changed. He never talked again, and in the 1970s, he passed away in a mental health facility. Records were sealed, but others who have been inside the cave have. reported weird things including an unidentified humming sound, time-distorted timepieces that flash behind closed eyes, cause unexpected dizziness, and drained batteries' voices echo oddly, repeating things that have never been heard. In the 1980s, a local woman who went inside stated she lost 3 hours. She came out with 3 puncture marks on the back of her neck and her boots with the soles worn through. Her medical records state that the wounds are surgically precise but unexplainable, but what really worries those who know is that items discovered close to the cave's entrance over the years are known as artifacts, if you can call them that. Pieces of unmarked obsidian coins in the shape of keys that were once little a. Geologists who studied the metal tablet found that it was inscribed with a grid of little raised squares. Claimed it didn't match any known alloy on Earth, and before more testing could be done, the tablet disappeared from his lab. According to local tradition, the cave is connected to earlier myths about creatures that dwelt beneath the mountains, beings that were neither human nor animal depending on the storyteller. They were either guardians, watchers, or jailers. One story told by the Lape states if the songs of the stone are unlocked, a mouth in the earth where the sky once fell will be protected forever. Call back the others. The stories of people who have dreamed about the cave but never really seen it are even wilder. Then some residents grow pale when they view drawings of the cave's entrance. I've seen them claim that in a dream years a long time ago, people talked about going down stone steps and seeing a room with a gentle blue glow and something just out of the ordinary. Of site monitoring, constantly observing. In 2003, a study team from a tiny private organization used ground-penetrating radar and sonar to try to investigate the area, claiming to find kilometers of tunnels and chambers beneath the cave's expansive open areas before they could. An unidentified buyer unexpectedly purchased the land when they returned to explore it, and fence was put up to block entrance to the cave. Known only in rumors, vanished from view once more. And some people think the cave was once a pre-human shrine. Some believe it to be a natural fissure or weak point between dimensions, while others believe it to be a race with knowledge far beyond ours. Convinced that it's a prison, constructed to house a force that we were never supposed to meet. And then there's the cave's behavior that appears to make it difficult to locate. Maps shift GPS hikers circle for hours only to repeatedly pass the same tree. And when they do locate the opening, the forest becomes silent, as some people claim to have seen what lays when it comes to watching and waiting and assessing the intentions of those that arrive. Beyond the first chamber, they describe a vast hallway with tall, polished pillars that hum when viewed for an extended period of time. The touching sculptures on the wall change. At the far end is a doorway that is covered with a stone slab. The cave is filled with interconnecting spirals, and no one has yet to access it. It is an anomaly, a wound, a portal, a monument, and more than just stone and gloom. Doesn't act like a natural setting because it isn't. And those who find it frequently undergo subtle changes. Silently, as though the cave demands something in exchange for allowing you to leave again. Most people now stay away from the area, but some people still observe silent men who come to the forest's edge and leave little offerings, stones piled so that the feathers are joined together. They simply nod and leave after pressing copper coins into tree bark with rope, without explaining why. If you go through Panther Valley's peaceful woodlands and see the black hole beneath the stone, look closely before entering, because not everything that enters is intended to exit, and some doors open both ways. Giant stones sleeping as the sun slowly sets over the Delaware River Gap. Gold is poured across the crest, creating echoes beneath the keystone lines and capturing the glistening surfaces of vanished streams. It's a stunning location that is abundant in trails and hidden waterfalls. But in the highlands, just off the well-traveled routes, where the air is calm and the woods are more dense, the sleeping stone giant is a final riddle that is said to be as old as the stones themselves, in contrast to the vaults, petroglyphs, or the Forbidden Cave. This isn't a building or a room, but a massive, undamaged shape. If you stand in just the right position, you can see the mountain lying across the landscape as though it had once drawn breath before becoming motionless. Ideal location next to Kittatinny Ridge. And when you gaze out across the valley, the terrain resembles a human body in every way. The torso is formed by the legs together, arms at the sides, and a reclining face toward the sky. The jaw is defined by a cliff, and trees grow like hair along the ridgeline, with precise proportions that may be rejected as an example of pareidolia, when the human brain perceives faces and figures that are not there, save for hikers and for more than a century, naturalists have. Notice something odd about the formation. The symmetry is two exact curves that are too deliberate, and moreover, it appears that photos taken decades apart reveal changes in the satellite imaging has verified minor changes in the chin, the chest slope, and even the arm's location. Although the changes in recent years are true, they are occurring very slowly and discreetly. Nobody notices until a side-by-side comparison is made. Some claim it's simply erosion, while others are unsure. Stories describe this landform as a guardian that was positioned here in the past to preserve something, rather than as a sleeping giant. According to their oral legends, the Skywalkers' celestial architects shaped the earth. The giant was one of their own, constructed with time and thought rather than tools, and it was bound in stone, resting until the stars. Strangely, these tales describe the ground beneath the giant as hollow stone after returning to a specific configuration. Wombs beneath the surface where memory wanders and light sings. As revealed by multiple separate ground scans in the 1990s, academic teams discovered caverns beneath the ridgeline that were enormous and silent. They were the size of buildings, but no digging or drilling was allowed because the region is part of the national park and protected government territory. Since those discoveries were made public, the service has implemented access limitations. Yet, local stories continue to exist and become more bizarre. Campers who stay close to the crest report strange feelings, such as dreams that don't feel like dreams, and a man who woke up screaming after witnessing a woman who claimed to have heard a deep pulse emerge from the valley with a silver face. Compasses go haywire, clocks stop animal from avoiding the ridge line, and the earth that began with her own till she collapsed highest point, which is surrounded by broad arcs, and there is an odd dearth of vegetation in some areas of the giant's face. Trees are incapable of producing moss, which geologists refer to as spreading in perfect lines. Although it may be a coincidence, many who have attempted to plant their claim that something in the soil kills. One gardener reported to have discovered a layer of smooth black stone that was cool to the touch after excavating close below the surface. There are several explanations about the sleeping stone giant's unbreakable humming gently, that is an area where geomagnetic fields formerly converged, leaving behind a trace of primordial earth energies. Some people think it's a living, breathing thing that has been sealed in stone, while others see it as a petrified conduit of unknown power. Preserved in some suspended animation, some of which imply that it is a boat or vessel that landed or was buried long ago. Its actual form was obscured by time and the terrain. And then there are the lights, which are faint glows that are primarily seen at night. Little bluish orbs occasionally pulse while floating just above the treetops. A park ranger once chased one, mistaking it for a drone or hiker's light, only to see that they could disappear in an instant. Fall straight into the ground and vanish. Silently, he would not discuss it later. In 2011, a local celestial star chart was superimposed over the water gap scenery by a historian and amateur photographer. The outcome, it seemed strange that the sleeping giant's face was directly in line with the constellation of Orion. Betelgeuse's feet extended toward the location, and his belt matched the twin troughs formed by the Delaware River. Although it wasn't flawless, the image of Sirius was close enough to prompt inquiries. Shape intended to resemble Orion or to invoke a long-forgotten late chant that missionaries had recorded in general. The 1700s means that the mountain will breathe again when the hunter lies motionless and the wolf forgets the moon. Nobody knows what it signified. But given the giant's changing shape, some people think it's a recently. Hikers have reported feeling tremors in the vicinity, which are minor, isolated earthquakes that don't appear on according to seismic maps. A group of people camping close to the ridge in 2022 said that the ground slightly lifted beneath their tents during the not much at night, only enough to raise their equipment an inch or two. They assumed it was a joke until they noticed the slope trees had moved around them, and a new fissure had formed in a nearby boulder that hadn't been there before. The notion that something could still be alive beneath the soil and that the land could move on its own ice and settling. But in Pennsylvania, these ideas have subtly followed each legend we've investigated: Susquehannock mounds that hum, stone monoliths that line up with stars, and petroglyphs that hint about the tug of the cave that takes more. than it provides, and the vaults that defy time all point to the same unsettling notion. Was there something here that waited, watched, and might still be sleeping? Stone Giant could be the last chapter or the last piece. But whatever it is, whether it is a century or a structural emblem, its shape resonates with people on an old level that it is more than simply a mountain. It is a reminder and possibly a cautionary tale.